Hello, everyone. Welcome to this live event. I'm Janet Ayub, one of the course tutors, and we're going today to discuss planning communicative lesson. Now, here's my colleague, Nelson. How are you, Nelson?
Hello,
Hi.
Janet. Very excited to be here today.
Hi, Nelson. How are you? Fine?
Oh, very well, Janet. How are you?
I'm fine. So today we're going to discuss planning communicative lessons. What do you think? Is this an interesting topic for our teachers?
Oh, absolutely. There's been lots of really interesting discussions in the community. So thank you very much, everyone, if you contributed to those discussions. We'll be taking some of your questions as well today. And in the meantime, remember that you can post your questions in the chat, and you can also tell us where you're joining us from. And we'll do our best to
Right.
discuss the questions from you.
Yes, we'll try our best to discuss their questions, their interesting questions. So we can start now with what do you mean or what is the definition of a communicative lesson? What do you think, Nelson? What
Um,
is a communicative lesson?
Mm, I think it's a lesson where the learners are actively engaged in communicating with one another, right? So
Mhm.
there should be a reason why learners are communicating and listening to each other. So we need to remember to set a clear task that learners need to do or a goal, right? Activities need to be personalized so they can use their own
Mhm.
experience, their own life experience, their interests, and it needs to be pitched at the right level of challenge. I think so. It depends on their age and also their level. So we need to think about making the activity right for their level and their age. And it's a lesson where learners are in groups and pairs working together while the teacher takes a more of a facilitator role. They monitor, they support, they make notes, and then they give feedback on language afterwards.
That's
So
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
I totally agree with you.
mhm,
And simply, we can say that it emphasizes interaction, real life situations, and
mhm,
purposeful language use where students talk, listen, negotiate meaning, and express
mhm,
ideas through pair or group work.
mhm.
So, simply, it's a lesson where
Yes.
communication
Yes,
is
that's right.
both the goal and the
One of
means of
our community
learning.
members said that it needs to be about student talking time, not
Mhm,
teacher
mhm.
talking time. So I think that this is very important to remember that communicative lessons are about maximizing student talking time and reducing our talking time.
That's right.
Hmm.
So when we talk about a communicative lesson, uh, typically it has three main qualities.
Hmm.
First, we talk about learner interaction.
Hmm.
Students actively use language to communicate with each other
Hmm.
in pair or group work. Also, we have meaning focused tasks where
Hmm.
activities are based on real life purposes, exchanging information, solving problems, or expressing opinions. And
Hmm.
also authentic communication, where the emphasis on fluency, understanding,
Mm.
and conveying meaning rather than just grammatical accuracy. So,
Yes.
what do you think? What do you think?
No, absolutely. I agree with your summary. I think those three key areas are what perhaps distinguish a communicative lesson from
Mhm,
a non-communicative one.
mhm.
Um,
Okay.
and of course, as teachers, we always try and make our lessons as communicative as possible. But teachers
Mhm.
sometimes say that it can be quite challenging to set up communicative activities. Um,
Uh-huh.
what challenges do you think that teachers usually have setting up communicative activities and lessons,
Yeah.
Janet?
This is really an excellent question and that we have discussed. Thank you for asking, Nelson. So first, we might have unequal participation where some students dominate while others stay quiet. So here, the solution might be assign clear roles in group work to ensure
Mm, mm,
fear making mistakes. So in this case, we might create a supportive atmosphere where mistakes are seen as learning opportunities. Also,
mm,
another one is assessment difficulties, where measuring cognitive competence can be subjective. So here, we might use rubrics to assess communication fairly and transparently.
mhm.
So, so assessment might be very, very important. So we might use rubrics to assess communication fairly and and transparently. What do you think, Nelson?
Yes, no, absolutely. I think what you said about large classes is very relevant to some of our teachers. How do you manage group work in a classroom with 40 or 50 learners, right? I think one strategy that could be done is appointing group leaders. So the group leaders are the ones who are in charge of handing out material. They could be in charge of timing turns and chairing discussions, and also perhaps volunteering to demonstrate the activities in front of the class. Um, that's one thing that I think that is a main challenge. Another challenge is classroom layout as well. Sometimes we can't move the furniture around. Um, so what I do when I can't do that is I either get my students in a row for the one sitting in the middle to sit back, and then the other two can lean in, or the ones in front can turn round and move their chairs to come nearer the one sitting behind, so that you can have so the two in front working with the two students behind them. Um, Layout. I think also demonstrations, I think, are important. It's important to demonstrate activities before giving instructions for students to do the activities. They need to see them in action, right? So a good thing to do might be to get the stronger learners out front and involve the class as much as possible in the demonstration. This is particularly important, I think, with primary learners. So rather than perhaps getting two students up front for everyone else to watch, what I do is I get one learner out front, and then the class take it in turns to ask the volunteer students the questions to demonstrate asking and answering. And then once you've done that, it's easier for learners to do it on their own, if you see what I mean. So
Yeah.
demonstrations and checking your
Yes.
instructions are quite important. Yeah.
Yes. We're talking about, we might talk about the overuse of L1. So we can encourage
Yes.
English use
Mm,
by pre-teaching useful chunks and rewarding
mhm,
students for using them, maybe by giving them short speaking turns, design tasks that require continuous interaction until completion.
mm,
Maybe also we can differentiate by adjust task difficulty. For instance, stronger learners give more reasons or details. Also, we have, as you talked about the fixed classroom layout, right? About
mm,
large class.
mhm. Yes. Yes, no, that's a good point, Janet. The overuse of L1, I mean, that's something that teachers complain about as well, isn't it? What I do sometimes to help them with that is to teach them the chunks that they're going to use in the communicative activity. So I usually write the chunks in on the board in speech bubbles. Um, it could be a phrase, or it could be a sentence starter, or I give them those chunks on a handout, or sometimes I give them the language chunks on pieces of card. So what they do is they have them on the table, all spread out, and whenever they use some phrase or target chunk, if you like, they take the card, and then that's 1 point. So you make it nice and competitive, and the one who uses the most language or phrases wins. So you make it nice and game like, if you like. Okay, I think let's have a look at some of the questions from our community members. Um, So, yes, teaching adults some challenges include students being self conscious. Yes, and not only adults, teenagers as well. And Janet gave a good strategy for that, which is giving them roles. So they're not themselves when they are speaking. So if you give them a role to play, then they come out of their shell a little bit, and they're not as shy because they're not speaking in their own person, but they're speaking in role. So role plays are usually good for shyer students. Time constraints, yes, that's important, isn't it? Because usually we leave our communicative activities for the end of the lesson, and it's a good idea to make them more kind of central to our lesson planning. So, I mean, that's a good thing to talk about is what frameworks do we use for lesson planning? And I think one of the kind of the drawbacks, I think, of the traditional PPP approach, which is present, practice, and production, is that we tend to leave those communicative activities for the very end of a lesson. And sometimes, we run out of time, and we don't have time for those activities. So they're a bit rushed, and learners are not getting as much practice. And another drawback, I think, with the PPP approach is that it focuses on form, and it gets learners to use target language. So it focuses on grammar and vocabulary. But what we're trying to do in that free practice activity is for learners to use target language, right? The language that we have used. So one thing that you can do to make communicative lessons the central aspect of lessons is to experiment with a different framework. So, for example, task-based learning. I mean, this might be a good thing for our community members to write in the chat. Is if you have experimented with task-based learning. Hello, Janet. We were talking. Yes,
Belmont?
yes, and then we lost you
Okay.
for a few minutes. So
Yeah.
now I
Okay.
was talking a little bit about what frameworks teachers can use to plan communicative lessons, and I was talking about the
Exactly.
distinction between the PPP framework and the TBL
And
framework,
the
and
exactly.
how TBL makes, or task-based learning, if you like, makes communicative lessons or communicative activities the central aspect
Mhm.
of a lesson. Um,
Exactly.
what
I
what
agree
would
with you. So here, in short, to prepare them, they prepare, they do, they reflect, where communication comes first, grammar and form follow naturally. And we have
yes.
sometimes task-based learning can be extended to include project-based learning or done online. For example, web quest or TBL can extend to
Mm,
project-based or online learning. So all of these might be very important. And
mhm,
we have to talk about the three main stages of task-based learning. So
mhm,
we have the pre-task, the teacher introduces the topic, explains the task, and provides useful language or examples. And we have the task cycle, where students perform the task, often in pairs or groups, using the target language to communicate meaningfully.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, we have the language focus in the post task. Yes, you were
Mm-hmm.
about to say something. Sorry, Nelson, go
Yes.
ahead, please.
And in the post task, you might want to perhaps give them a little bit of feedback on their language
Mhm.
use. Now, this is not obligatory, right, Janet? It's
Yes,
optional. Um, I think
exactly.
I
That's
think
right.
hard TBL is very much focused on
Mhm,
meaning rather than
mhm,
language. But you can include a post task where you focus on language, maybe
mhm,
improving language that the students have said and or mistakes, and then maybe
mhm,
also to evaluate how well they performed in
mhm.
the task, right? So a little bit of self-assessment.
That's right. Very
Hmm.
good. Yeah.
Hmm.
Now, what about some examples of communicative activities or tasks?
Hmm.
What do you think? So,
Hmm.
some clear examples of communicative activities or tasks can be information gap.
Hmm.
Students have different pieces of information and must communicate to complete the task, finding differences between two pictures, or maybe role plays. Learners take on roles, customer and shop assistant to practice
Hmm.
real life conversations, maybe
Hmm.
problem solving tasks. Groups discuss and decide on a solution, planning a class trip, or choosing the best job candidate, or maybe opinion sharing. Students express and justify their views on a topic. Do smartphones help or harm learning? Also, we might have surveys or interviews. Learners ask and answer questions to collect information and then report results to the class.
Hmm. Yes, that's right.
Okay,
Yes.
so this is what we have here.
Hmm. Um, there's also, for example, jigsaw reading. So reading can also be made communicative, right? So different learners in a group have a different part of a
Now,
text.
so it's very important to focus on all of these things. What do you think, Nelson?
Yes, I was just saying about jigsaw reading and how we can make reading lessons communicative as well, right? So each
Exactly, that's
learner
right.
each learner in a group, so for example, in a group of three, has a different part of the text, and they answer questions about their part of the text, and then they have to communicate to give the missing information to the other members of the group to piece together the whole text. So I think that's a really, really nice activity to make reading communicative. There's also ranking activities where the learners have to put certain statements in order of importance. So, for example, what do you think are the most important things when you're on holiday? And they have to write one, yeah, the most important, two, the second most important, and so on. And then they discuss and justify why they thought that it was the most important or the second most important one. Um, you mentioned role play. What about different layouts? You,
Let me tell you about the spinning wheel. What do you think of the spinning wheel?
oh,
Learn choice. For
mhm.
example, in the pre-task stage, you use it randomly for warm-up discussions. For the task stage, let groups spin to get different tasks, giving directions, making a complaint, planning an event. Each spin leads to a real use the wheel for reflection, prompts, or peer feedback focus. For example, clarity, fluency, and teamwork. So it keeps learners engaged and makes tasks more dynamic. So, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a really nice idea, Janet. Can students make the spinning wheel themselves using card and scissors and
I
so on?
think yes. What I think yes, they can, and they will enjoy preparing such a spinning wheel out of their
Hmm.
own. It's very easy to prepare it. If a teacher doesn't have time to prepare it, the students he might ask the students to prepare it. Do you
Yeah,
agree?
that's really nice. Yeah. And then they could choose
Mhm.
different topics, maybe different topics that they've seen in class. So it could be a good thing for assessment or revision, if you like. And they write the
Or
different
maybe,
topics. Yeah. And then
or
they
maybe
spin the
we can.
wheel and they ask each other questions about that
Mhm.
topic, right?
Mhm. Or maybe we can use it for reading comprehension questions, having different questions here. Or maybe we can use it for teaching grammar, simple present, simple past, simple future, for anything.
Hmm.
This is what we can talk about the spinning wheel.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a nice
So
idea.
exactly, yes, exactly.
Mhm.
Now,
Um,
yes.
I'm just looking at some of the other questions from our community members. And there's an interesting question about can I use audiobooks to conduct a communicative activity? What do you think about that, Janet?
Now, of course, they can use audiobooks, but here they have to use AI and they have to use the internet. And you know that some people or some teachers have problems with technology and they don't have access to technology. So
Mm,
maybe in this case, of course, they can, if they ban a certain communicative activity, maybe they can share the link of this audiobook with the students and we
mhm,
can prepare a certain activity or a set of questions that they can reply in groups
mhm,
when they come back to the class if they don't have access to the internet. But at the
mhm.
end, it
Yeah,
depends
that's a
if
nice
the
idea.
internet is
So I would
exactly.
suggest perhaps to choose an extract from the audiobook rather than the whole audiobook. Just maybe give them, 1 or 2 minutes of a listening from that audiobook. And then, as you say, that's a nice idea. If you have technology like Google Classroom, you could post the link to that 2-minute extract and then give learners some questions, right, to either discuss in writing, or maybe they could record and answer. So it's a speaking forum using tools like Vocaroo, which is an online recorder. It's free, and learners can record their answer using Vocaroo, and
Mhm,
then the software gives them a link which they can then copy and paste into the forum or
mhm,
Google
mhm,
Classroom, and it becomes
mhm,
a speaking and listening discussion
mhm.
activity. So yes, by all means, you can use an audiobook, but yes, I would suggest that you use 1 or 2 minutes. Mhm. Okay, right. So I think that we've come to the end of our session. It's been a really interesting discussion. We've talked about what makes a lesson communicative. We've also discussed some of the challenges that teachers have setting up um, communicative lessons and some strategies to deal with those. We've also talked about frameworks for lesson planning. So, what is the difference between a PPP and a TBL approach, and how TBL perhaps focuses more on meaning and makes communication more central in the lesson. We've also talked about different communicative activities, and we also discussed an example of how technology can be used to set up communicative activities online. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Please keep interacting in the community. It's great to see all your questions and all your ideas and interacting with one another. And we'll see you next Thursday in our next live session. Bye bye, everyone.
How to save Facebook posts and find them again. You can save posts, pictures, links, events, and images you see on Facebook to view later. Tap the three dots. Then, Save Post to add it to your saved items for later, or to create a collection. Collections allow you to group the posts you save around a topic or theme. Enter a descriptive name. Then tap Create, and the post will be added to it. To see your saved posts, tap on your profile. Then, tap Saved. You can then view all your saved items or those in a particular collection. Tapping on the picture next to a saved item will play a video or open a link within the post. To see the original post and comments, tap on the three dots. Then, View Original Post.